Yes, I would encourage you to really consider coming to Fusion. It is a good time. I don't know if you noticed, I was they had a picture of me up there. I spoke last year, and I think I was wearing the same shirt I'm wearing today. If I had my way, I've told my wife this as I get older, I would have 7 jumpsuits, all different colors, and I would just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'd put the same one. But my wife won't let me do that, so she's going to spare you from seeing me that way. But we are going to spend a little bit of time today finishing up a real short little series that we started last week. And it's called Walk with God. And where this came from is we've been walking through the book of Genesis slowly. We've been working on that for some time. We're going to pick Genesis up again next week, spend a few more weeks on that, and we'll slowly get our way all the way through the book of Genesis. But as we've looked at Genesis, we've seen a couple different instances where it says so-and-so walked with God. Enoch was a guy. It says he walked with God. A little while later, it says Noah walked with God. Coming up in a few more chapters in Genesis, we're going to see that Abraham walked with God. And so this idea of walking with God, I thought it would be good for us to talk about that, because I think sometimes when we read stories of these people in the Bible, you think about Noah and Abraham, and they're these giants, it's like playing basketball with Michael Jordan, gosh, I can play basketball, but I'm not Michael Jordan, and so there's no chance I could ever do that. We can look at some of these people in the Bible and the things that they experienced and think, wow, that's really cool, but that's just for them. Noah can walk with God, but that's just for him. It isn't just for Noah. It's for you and me. God intended you and I to walk with him, to live our life with him. He uses these physical pictures so that we can understand some spiritual realities. We know what it's like to walk with someone, to go on a walk with someone. My wife and I go for walks around the back loop in our neighborhood, and we're walking together, and we're talking together. My wife and I have walked through life together. We've experienced so much of the same things. We know what it's like to walk with someone, to walk through life with someone. God's desire for you is that you walk through your life with him, just like Noah, just like Abraham, just like Enoch. So we're talking about that. And last week, just a brief bit of review, we looked at this verse in Psalm 139, and we made the statement that this is true of you. This is a truth for you. It says, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?" If you have accepted Christ, if you are a Christian, and we talked about what that means last week, if you are a Christian, if you have gone to God and said, "Jesus, pay the penalty for my sins. I know I'm a sinner, but you have died for my sins, and I take that for a gift." If you've done that, you are a Christian, and this is true of you. You are in God's presence. God's presence is with you. It's real, it's constant, it's personal. It's just as real as my presence with you today, only it's spiritual. We don't see it, so it seems mysterious, seems odd, but the truth is that it's just as real. We talked about that last week. If you weren't here last week, I'd encourage you to go listen to that message online, because we talked about the truth of it. This describes your condition. This is your reality. You are in God's presence if you have accepted Christ as your Savior. But then there's another step to it. And that's this: because that is true of you, this verse can be true for you. And it's in Psalm 73, "Yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand." A little while later, "But as for me, it is good to be near God." Because your condition is you are living your life in God's presence, because that's true, that's your reality, because of that, this can be your experience. You have the opportunity of interacting then with God. You can be in someone's presence and not interact with them. You can be in someone's presence and not have it impact you as much as it could. God's desire is that you would realize, you would believe the truth that God is that close, constant, personal presence in your life if you're a Christian. And then, because that's true, you would experience interacting, feeling, hearing, really experience walking with God. Last week we talked about that first part. Accepting the reality of that. Seeing, believing the reality of that. Today we're going to talk about that second part. Because that's real, what does that look like? How do I experience that? And it's worth mentioning again here that the reason we divided this up is because these really are two separate things that go together. Last week we talked about believing, understanding the reality of it. This week we're going to talk about taking the opportunity to experience it. And they're connected, but they're not the same, because something can be true but not experienced. Right? Something can be true but not experienced. When I graduated from law school, I was a lawyer. I was. I had the diploma. I'd been accepted to the bar in Wisconsin. My condition, my state was I was a lawyer. That was my reality. But coming out of law school, my reality didn't match my experience. I had no idea of what it meant to be a lawyer. I had never done it before. So my condition, what was true was I was a lawyer, but I hadn't experienced it. I had to go figure out how to do it. I tell people, I didn't know this at the time, but I graduated from law school with permission to go learn how to be a lawyer. That's all I got for going to law school. I had no idea how to do it. So something can be true but not experienced. And, that's fun. We're experiencing the reality of cell phones right now. That's what's happening. Something can be true and not experienced, and the understanding and joy of something that's true comes from the experience. That's an awkward sentence. What I mean by it is this. Because something is true, the depth of understanding it and the joy of that truth really comes through experiencing it. Let me give you an example. On the day that I got married, I became a husband. I was a husband. I had the paper to prove it. Some of you were there that day and saw me become a husband. And so I walked down the aisle at the end of that ceremony, and I was a husband. That was true. That was 34 years ago. Really knowing what it means to be a husband and feeling and seeing the joy of being a husband it didn't start, I just had it all right then that day when I walked down the aisle. No, I have experienced the joy and the heartache. I have learned what it really means to be a husband, and I have felt the joy and the beauty of it only by walking it. Does that make sense? Just because you live in God's presence doesn't necessarily mean that you are experiencing it. So what we're going to talk about today is that how we can, as Christians, step into really experiencing walking with God. What does that look like for us on a daily basis? God is close to us. His presence is real, and we have the opportunity to interact with Him. But what does that look like? And the way we're going to do it is we're going to look at some familiar pictures that God gives us to help us understand it. God does this a lot. He gives us very familiar examples. He says, walking with me is like this. And He'll tell us something that we've experienced. And so, I've experienced that. I know what that's like. And now I can learn from that. And that's what it looks like to walk with God. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at some examples that God gives us, some familiar examples that God gives us of what it looks like for us to really practically experience God's presence, to really walk with God in our lives. And the way we're going to do it is I'm going to describe or lay out each one of these different pictures that God gives us, each one of these different relational experiences that God gives us that helps us to understand. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit of how that has played out with me in my life. And then I'm going to give you a biblical example of it that you can go and study a little bit on your own. And just one more brief word about that. The reason I'm going to share the things that share my experiences is not because mine are the best, mine are complete, or anything like that. It's just that I want us to understand this is not for somebody far away. This is for us right now. I'm no different. I mean, we're all in this together. So the reason I share my own stories is not because they're the best ones or yours are going to look exactly the same way or I'm really good at this stuff. It's not that at all. It's just I want us to understand this is for us now, today. Not far away, not long ago, not somebody else. Me and you. We can walk with God in our life today, okay? That's what we're going to do. So, we're going to look at 5 different pictures that God gives us of relationships that are familiar to us that we can learn from and what it really means for us to walk with God. Here's the first one. It's the picture of a child with a parent. This is one that shows up a lot in the Bible, but God says walking with Him is like a child walking with his or her parents. Here in Psalm 131, it's a very short little psalm, 3 verses. It says, "My heart is not proud, O Lord, my eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me, but I have stilled and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with its mother, like a weaned child is my soul within me." I like that. I don't concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me, but I'm just like a child with his mother. That's David talking about his relationship with God. And it's this idea of a child with a parent. So what does that mean? How do we take that and apply it to our lives? How do we take this understanding of how a child interacts with his parent and apply it to our lives? Well, here are some words that I think help me to kind of put some feet under this a little bit. Here, words that help me to know what that looks like. And it's these, that, as I thought about how a child interacts with his parents, these are the words I came up with: trust, dependence, and simplicity. A child trusts his or her parents. A child is dependent upon his or her parents. And that parent-child relationship, at least from the child's standpoint, is filled with a lot of simplicity. It's not a real complicated thing. So what does that look like for you and I? How do you and I apply that in our relationship with God on a daily basis? Well, here are some of the ways that that's played out with me. And the first one is that trust idea. And there's so many opportunities we have just in our ordinary life to learn how to trust God, or to be put in a situation and to recognize a situation where we have to trust God. The one big example is just the world stage that we're on. I suspect many of us, I'll put it that way, I read the papers and it bothers me. It's hard to read the paper sometimes, and I suspect that's true for all of us, maybe for different reasons. You know, some of us, the world around us is changing rapidly, and it doesn't seem to be always for the better. There's war in different parts of the world. I grew up, I'm old enough to remember in my school we had nuclear fallout shelters. Sometimes they were under the desk. I don't know how that was going to how that was going to protect me, but we would actually practice the nuclear things. Well, that seemed to disappear, didn't it? The Cold War ended in 1989. The Berlin Wall came down. Well, gosh, it seems like we're back there, doesn't it? Where there's threats now of nuclear war again, and that's discomforting, and it is very it can be very fearful. Just look at our country. We live in a very polarized political environment where there seem to be very radically different competing ideas of what's good for the country. And depending on which one you agree with, the other one can be very scary. And to think, oh my gosh, I think this is what has to happen, and I think that is really bad, but if that happens, then it's something really bad. And you may be on the other side. I think this is what's supposed to happen, and that's really bad. And it can be very, very disconcerting, can't it? It is for me. So what do I do? Well, there's some things I can do. I vote. But a lot of it, I am not going to be able to change it. So what do? I say, Lord, I just read this the other day. Lord, you are the King of the nations. God says, I am the King of the nations. I hold kings' hearts in my hand. All of time and history is subject to me, and I have not relinquished control of it. Now, I can't explain all of that. I don't know how that's going to play itself out, but I can trust it. I can choose. I can make a choice to say, I'm like a weaned child. I don't concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. That is not my arena to solve. That is not what you've asked me to do, but I will trust you. And the way I know I'm trusting is if there's a peace that comes over me. Like a weaned child with its mother. I like that. A weaned child, one that's not grabbing and asking for things. I need, just settled and calm in his mother's lap. Because everything is explained to him or her? Nope. Because everything is as it's supposed to be? Probably not. Because someone else is in charge. I can trust God when I read the paper. That's the practical thing. The dependence. Well, I think for me, one of the biggest things is financial. I think that's why God talks about money so much, because he knows how much this depends on that. We want to depend on money for all kinds of things, when God says, no, I want you to depend on me and not money. So I think that's why God talks about it so much. But for me, certainly that's one way that as I live my life, I have to depend on God, and it's good if I do. I just went down to... I told you last week I went down to Atlanta to see my son. He's in the military, and it was a last-minute thing, and so I spent way too much money on everything. Because when you rent a car, it's expensive. When you rent a car the day before you're supposed to have it, it's really expensive. And so I ended up, I rented a car, and I went down there. I showed up in Atlanta, and I walked up to the counter, and me and about 20 other people were standing there, and there were no cars. None. They didn't have any cars. And I kind of feel bad for the guy behind the counter, because he was trying to make 20 really angry people happy. And it was hard for him to do. But when it came my turn to go up and to have him tell me there's no cars, I went up and he told me there's no cars. And so we had a little conversation, and he said, you know what? I have no idea if or when a car is going to come. If I were you, here's a card for a different car company. I would call them and get a car. So I did. I called them, got a car, was fine. He said, I'll put notes in the computer. Well, that car company then chose to charge me anyhow, the one that didn't give me the car. So on my credit card bill, there's a $353 charge for a car I didn't get. I went through the complaint procedure, which is like walking through a corn maze blindfolded in the dark with your feet tied together. And every response I got is, nope, you signed a contract, we're going to charge you $353. And it made me fierce. I wanted to go find the guy behind the counter and strangle him. And I don't have $353 to pay for a car I didn't get. And it just, I would wake up and I would feel this tightness in my chest and this anger. You've probably been there. It's like, that's my money and I got to get it back somehow. But then I take a deep breath and God says, you know what, Rob? I know you need food and clothes and shelter, and I'll provide them for you. A little kid is willing to trust mom and dad. I don't know if I'm going to get that $353 back, but I'm going to be fine. I went to put my toothpick in my pocket and found $6 in my pocket. There. So now it's $347 that I'm out. Yeah, I'm gonna blow up the car company is what I'm gonna do. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. But the point is, financially, we can, on a very regular basis, choose to be dependent on God. Very real. Very, very practical, very real. I say, Lord, you're going to take care of me. And again, there's a peace that comes over it. The last thing is that simplicity and understanding that in a childlike relationship, there is a simplicity that I think is good for us to develop and to experience in our relationship with God. We have a grandson. Sue and I have a grandson who is a year and a half old, and they sent us a video where he was playing peekaboo with his mom and dad. And it is, if you remember your own kids or your own grandkids, a kid playing peekaboo is just the greatest thing ever. But as much as you enjoy it, you get tired of it after a while. The kid never does. They will play peekaboo for the rest of time and find this incredible delight in it. Where's Zion? Peekaboo! Ha ha ha! He just laughs, and then he does it again and again and again. There is a simplicity in delighting in simple things. We had our neighbors over yesterday. They're new in the neighborhood, and they have 3 little kids, and we had them over, and we have a swing set in our backyard from when our kids were little, and the kids got in the swings and pushed me. And I was remembering back, this will never end. I could stay here and push this little kid for the rest of time, and it'll never get old. Why? Because there's a simplicity in delighting in simple things. You and I can do that in our relationship with God. I was walking through the backyard, and I looked down, and there was a leaf off a maple tree that was just crazy colors. It's just a dead leaf. But I picked it up, and my soul was filled with delight. Wow, that is cool. We had some phenomenal weather last week. You walk outside, it's sunny, it's 73 degrees, there's no humidity. You're just like, oh, that's a gift to you from the Lord. A kid will relish that, will lavish themselves in those simple things. Learn to, when you see that leaf, say, wow, God, that is amazing, that delight. What is it for you that delights your soul? I don't know. But there's probably simple things, good food, a nap, the Packers winning. Delight yourself in the simple things. Learn to be a child with its parent. Here's the second picture, the second relational thing that you can work at, practice. And by the way, all of these things are things that we grow in. We're all good at some of them, not good at some of them. So as I share these things, you may think, oh yeah, I really get that. That's good. You can grow farther. Some of these things I share, you might think, oh, I'm not good at that at all. That's fine. These are things that you can grow and you can practice. I'm just sharing ways that I've kind of practiced them, and you can go to God and you can learn. Here's the second one. It's walking with God like walking with a spouse. I'm sorry, can you back up? I did want to just share, if you want to go read a biblical example of all these different things, I've just given a couple, and these are ones that just make sense to me. So if you want to read about having that trust and dependence, you can read about Ezekiel. He's a man that God asked to do some very strange things, and he did them. And God blessed him, and I think it's a picture of just, I'm trusting you, God. I'm depending on you. You're going to have to. I don't get this stuff, but you do, and I'm just going to follow. And Ruth is the same way, but with more of that simplicity and more of that joy. So if you want to spend some time reading biblical examples of these things, there's a couple of them. You can read Ezekiel or Ruth. Okay, second one is a spouse, walking with God as a spouse. Here in Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, it's really a love song that is a picture of our relationship with God, and this really does describe our relationship with God. I am my lover's, and my lover is mine. The Song of Songs is an interesting book. It really is a picture of a passionate romance. But God says that's a picture of how he feels toward us and how we can respond to him. He uses that a lot. He says, I am the groom and you are my bride. And so we can learn from that. How does a spouse walk with a spouse? How does a spouse interact with a spouse? And how can I apply that to my relationship with God? Well, I think that the words that came to my mind when I thought about that are intimacy and emotion. There is an intimacy in a relationship with a spouse, and there is deep emotion in a relationship with a spouse. And those are the words that I think about. And when I think about my wife, this is true. We've been married for 34 years, and And, she comes up the stairs in the morning. It happens almost every day. Sometimes she's up before me, but one of us will be up there in the living room, and the other one will come up the stairs. And it happened this morning. I was sitting in my chair, and as she came up the stairs, my heart was excited, because that girl that I married 34 years ago, that I have walked with for so long, we've gone through great times and hard times and all kinds of things, she still makes my heart beat faster. She holds my hand when we go for a walk, and it really does stir me. And I think, Lord, that's how my relationship with you really can and should be. And so I've thought about, well, how does that happen? Here's one way for me that happens in my relationship with God. Every morning, Mark has shared this a lot. He's said that, no matter how much you love God, no matter how close you are to God, you go to sleep at night and you wake up in the morning and it's almost like you're a heathen again. It's like you're starting over every day. I find that. I wake up in the morning and I walk upstairs and I sit in my chair, and there are all kinds of things I can give my attention to. There's the baseball score from last night. There's not the Badger score. You don't want to know anything about that. That was terrible yesterday. But there are all kinds of things I can give my attention to. Sometimes I do, but here's something I have noticed. I have a bunch of verses that I've written out on a note card, which is just right from the Bible. It's God's Word, God's speaking. When I take those out and read them, in all honesty, I feel my heart warmed the same way I do when my wife walks up the stairs. Why? Because God is close, He's real, and I'm feeling His love to me. You are speaking to me. I just take His Word and I listen to it and I read it, and I find myself changing. I find myself emotionally changing because He's real. He's close, just like my wife is. You can't have that. I can have that. It happens. And it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. The person in the scripture that I think maybe personifies that the most is David. David is a man who understood and was willing to enter into a passionate relationship with God. A passionate, intimate relationship with God. If you want to see how that played out, read about David's life, read the Psalms. If you really want to go a little bit deeper, you can compare David to Solomon. Solomon is the one who wrote Song of Songs, that passionate love song. I think Solomon understood the reality of it, but didn't experience it. If you read about Solomon's life, he didn't experience that depth of intimacy with God like his dad did, like David, his dad did. So if you really want to study, look at David and how his life played out, and then compare it to Solomon, who knew this stuff but didn't walk into it. His life turned out very differently. So we learn to walk with God. How? As a child with its parent, as a spouse with its spouse. Here's a third one. Walking with God is like walking with a friend. This is a relational term that Jesus used here in John 15. Verse 15, he says, this is Jesus speaking, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. Walking with God is like walking with a friend. The words that I thought about, as I thought about being a friend, walking with a friend, are these: confidential and comfortable. Confidential and comfortable. It's interesting. Jesus said, hey, you know what? You're not just my servant. Instead, you're my friends. Why? Because I've told you everything that the Father has told me. And I have seen that. Two of my best friends in the world, probably my two best friends in the world are here in the room today. One of them is Greg. Actually, Greg is probably wandering. Is Greg in here? He's somewhere else, so I can say anything I want about him. There he is. I said at a conference, he looked like a strange combination of Uncle Si and Santa Claus. But never mind. But Greg is one of my good friends. And one of the things that's true about Greg and I is we've known each other forever, a long time. And I was trying to think this morning, is there anything of great consequence in my life that I haven't talked to Greg about? And I don't think so. I think pretty much everything that's happened to me at some point or other, Greg and I have talked about it. I think the same is true for him. I think I know things about Greg and about his life that many other people don't know, because we're friends and we have learned that we can be open and honest with each other without fear. I am confident that no matter what I tell Greg, he's not going to run away. I think Greg feels that about me. We've certainly been tempted, each of us, but we haven't. And so over time we have learned I can be an open door with you without fear. You're someone that I can tell what I'm thinking, even if I don't want to tell anybody else. I've seen that in this idea of being a friend with Greg. And so how does that translate to my relationship with God? Well, I have learned that when I feel like there's something I want to hide, something I'm ashamed of perhaps, or something I don't know if it's okay, or something that I'm, just don't want to bring out, I've learned, you know what? The best thing I can do is just bring it out and talk to God about it. Talk to Jesus. Just pray, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Hey, this is what I did. Hey, this is what's going on with me. Just very simply, just like I would with a friend. Just say, look, this is what's going on with me. Open the door. And what I find is Jesus really is a friend. He ain't going anywhere. When I tell him this is what I did and I'm ashamed of it, or this is what I'm thinking and I don't know what to think about that, or this is something that I'm not sure about, he talks to me about it. Sometimes he says, yeah, you're right, you should be ashamed of that. Let's change that. Sometimes he says, that's no big deal, or whatever. But I can do that with Jesus. And so when I feel, here's the practical point. When I feel, God, I don't want you to see this, I've learned to turn and open my hands and to talk to him about it. Open my mouth, pray. This is what I'm thinking. This is what's going on with me, just like I would with my friend Greg. My second great friend is Dan. He's right there. And Dan is really that's the comfortable one. It's very easy for me to be with Dan. Dan and I have a little game that we play. We call each other on the phone and never call each other back. That's so I'll call Dan and he'll call me back a week later and I won't answer. Then I'll call him back a week later and we do that. Well, yesterday we finally touched base. Actually, my wife called Dan to ask him about the Youth Rendezvous. That's the only reason I got to talk to Dan, is because he answered my wife's call, but not mine. But I sat and talked to Dan, and it was like it was just comfortable. It's like, I haven't talked to Dan, and now I'm talking to Dan, and it feels good. It just feels good to talk to Dan. Dan and I can get in the truck and drive to North Dakota, and sometimes we talk, sometimes it doesn't matter. It's just comfortable to be with him. I just enjoy his company. I look for reasons to spend time with Dan. He's putting up iron steps behind his garage. There's going to be a lot of work, and I keep telling him, call me when you do it. I'm not going to help. I'm going to stand in the back and watch, but I'm going to be there. No, I'll help. I look for reasons to be with Dan because he's my friend. It's that way with Jesus. So here's how I apply that in my relationship with God. When I'm doing something fun, I ask him to be part of it. No matter what it is. If I'm watching a movie, talk to him about the movie. If I'm going fishing, I love to fish, talk to him about it. If I'm listening to music, things that I enjoy, things that are just comfortable for me, I have learned, or I practice, I try hard to say, hey, listen to that song. Wow, I love those harmonies. I love that guitar solo, whatever. Talk to Jesus about the stuff that you're doing, because that's what a friend does. And he's interested in it. He really, truly is. He really, truly is, because he's interested in you. Because he's your friend. And he wants to do the things that you're doing, I believe. You can really walk in your relationship with God like you would with a friend. The person here that I think about is Abraham. In fact, that's the term more than once that is used to describe Abraham. God says, my friend Abraham. Abraham was a friend of God. So if you want to know what that looks like from a biblical perspective, you might want to look at the life of Abraham. Here's the fourth one, the fourth relationship that we understand that we can use to learn what it means to walk with God. And that's the relationship of a worker with his or her boss. In John chapter 9, verse 4, it says, as long as it is day, this is Jesus speaking, as long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. God has jobs for us to do. God says that we're his workmanship, we're his masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Part of your relationship with God is he is the boss and we are the workers. He has work for us to do. He has responsibilities that he wants us to accomplish. We have things to do for God in our life, and so learning how to interact with him on that basis is a good thing. It's a way we can walk with God through our life. And the words that I thought of when I thought about this are these: direction, help, and feedback. Getting direction from God, which is looking ahead. Where are we going? What do you want me to do next? Getting help from God, which is looking at what's going on right now. Here's the thing that's right in front of me. Help me to do it. And then getting feedback, which is looking back. All right, this is what I did. How did I do? Those three things, I think, are true of a relationship of a worker with a boss, and it can help us to walk with God in our life now. So what does that look like for me? Well, all kinds of different things. I'm at a different stage in my life now where Sue and I have been empty nesters for a few years. Our last child left in 2020, right? Yeah, right before the world shut down. He left. And so we've been empty nesters for 2 years now. I'm going to be 60 here in a little bit. My world is changing. My life is changing. My role here at church is changing some. I'm looking into the future. So there's just a lot of not knowing exactly what's going to happen in the future. So here's what I do a lot these days. I say, Lord, I know you want me to work, so what does that look like? What do you want me to do next? For years, I knew what was in front of me. I'm a pastor of this church. I was working with college students. It was all right. I knew it. I understood it. It was there. You know what? It's like if your boss says, I want you to build this building. All right? You work and it takes time and you do everything that needs to happen, but then they get the building built and then you step back and say, okay, what's next? Well, I'm at that what's next stage a little bit. And so I spend an awful lot of time saying, Lord, what's next? I ask him. I just ask him. What does it look like? I think about the term fruitful labor a lot because that comes from Paul. He wrote in Philippians, you know what, I'd love to leave here and go be in heaven, but I haven't yet, and until I do, as long as I'm here on this earth, it's going to be fruitful labor for me, and I think I like that. God, you have a job for me to do, and I'm not done, but I'm not quite sure what's next. So what does fruitful labor look like for me going forward? And I talk to God about it. And that's trying to get direction. What's the path you have for me next? What's the work you have set in front of me? And Sue and I work through that, and I work through it with Mark and Justin, the other pastors here. I work through it with my friends. What does it look like for me to be fruitfully laboring for you? I just ask. And God's beginning to lay things out. God's beginning to make things happen. But it's a conversation God and I have. Second one is help. And that's, okay, I'm doing this right now, God. Help me to do it. I love to speak. I love to teach. I love to do this. But when I do it, every time I spend so much time, particularly on Sunday mornings, I get up in the morning and I sit down and I say, Lord, help me to say what you want me to say today. Help me to know what you want me to say. Give me words to say. There have been so many times I've been sitting across from someone talking about something, and I felt to myself, I don't know what to say to this person. I don't know what I should say next. And so I'll pray, Lord, is there something you want me to say right now? Learning to, in the moment, say, God, this is what I'm doing right exactly now. What should I say? What should I do? Give me help right now. Make something happen that I couldn't make happen. I have spoken thousands of times. The number of times that I have walked off the stage and someone has come up to me and said, oh my gosh, that was great. you said this, and God just spoke to me. And I said that? I don't remember saying that. I'd never thought that before you just said it. I think it's just God helping. Hey, this person needs something. I'm going to put something in your mouth, Rob, and you're going to say it, and I'm going to use it to really impact somebody. But I think that comes when we ask for help. God, help me right now. Help me. Because God is a real-time God. He's not just, okay, that's what you want, that's what you have to do, go do it, and then I'll tell you whether you did it well or not. No, that's what I want you to do. Okay, let's go do it together. And then we'll talk about it afterward. God is a God who helps in real time. And finally, feedback. God gives feedback. He does it to me all the time. He helps me to know, okay, Rob, that wasn't good, or okay, Rob, it's okay. You did that well. And so much of it has to do with verses that I've read. I spend a lot of time reading the Word, and when I'm reading the Word, if something strikes me, I write it down. This is how I do it. I write it down, and then I carry it around with me. And this is one of the big ways God gives me feedback. And there are times when I'll be trying to do what I think God wants me to do, and sometimes I do it well, sometimes I don't. For sure it's not perfect. For sure it's limited. But I get encouragement from God all the time when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling discouraged, when I'm feeling like quitting or giving up. This is a verse I just go back to again and again and again. Hebrews 6:10. God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. Here's another one, Hebrews 10:35. Therefore, do not cast away your confidence, which has great reward, for you have need of endurance, so that after you have done the will of God, you may receive the promise. The point is that I let God and I ask God to give me feedback. Rob, that was good. Rob, that wasn't good. But it's okay, buddy. Let's keep going. That gives me encouragement. It gives me confidence. I know where I stand with him. I know where I stand with my boss. I worked as a lawyer for 10 years, and my bosses never once told me whether I was doing a good job or a bad job. And it's this strange limbo. It's not fun. God is not like that. God will tell you very clearly, yeah, this is great. This is not so good. But let's keep going. Look to God. Turn to God. Ask him to give you the direction, the help, and the feedback. Last one. Last picture of a relationship that I think helps us to understand. And this is one that is maybe harder for us to grasp, and yet I think it is one of the most important. If I were going to put these 5 different things that we're talking about today in order, I would say that the first one, really having the attitude of a child, trust, dependence, and simplicity, and this one that we're going to talk about now are the 2 most important. They're the pillars on which I think all of this rests, and it's this relationship. It's the relationship of a soldier. Walking with God is like a soldier walking with his commander. In Psalm 18. This is an interesting psalm. If you want to read it, it's a psalm. It's a song of war. David wrote this, and it's an interesting interplay between David fighting and then God fighting, and David fighting and God fighting. And it is not symbolic. This is war. And he says this in verse 34 about God: He trains my hands for battle. My arms can bend a bow of bronze. Most of us, some of us have been in the military. Probably most of us haven't. Perhaps some of us have been in combat. I would say perhaps the vast majority of us haven't. Here's a reality. You are in a war. If you are a Christian, you are in the middle of a spiritual battle. You are in the middle of a spiritual firefight that is raging. And we are soldiers in it. And so to understand this really helps us. I say that for all kinds of different ways. The Bible says that there's a war inside of you. You're fighting your own sinful nature. 1 Peter 2:11, it says, resist the evil desires inside of you that war against your soul. There is a war inside of you. Your sinful nature is fighting your spirit, and there is a war that is going on. And it's a war for your soul, your own inclinations and things inside of you. It is a battle. You are in a battle with the world around you. In Ephesians 6, it says that our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers and authorities in this present age. We are in a battle with the world around us. That there is a concerted push to keep you from walking with God, to get you to stop serving God from all of these different things. There is a battle that is going on. You are in a battle with the devil. He is real, and he is your enemy. That's what it says in 1 Peter a little bit later. Your enemy the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. This is a war. You are in a battle. You are in a battle. We have to understand that I'm in a battle, and I'm not a spectator. I'm a participant, which means I need God to train my hands for battle. I need God to train me for battle. The words I think of are strength and courage. I need strength from the Lord. I need courage. And strength, for me, one of the ways that this has really played itself out is, Lord, help me not to quit. Just help me not to quit. Help me not to quit in my relationship with you. Help me not to quit in what you set in front of me. Help me not to give up this fight that I'm in. Help me to live my life and stay in the battle till the end. I don't want to quit. I ask God that a lot. But here's something that I think is true. Our chances of not quitting in that cosmic battle are better if we learn to ask God, help us not to quit in little things that seem inconsequential. In other words, we can train ourselves. I need to be trained for battle. And part of that is I'm going to learn not to quit in this little inconsequential thing so that when the big things happen, I really can not quit. Let me give you an example. When I was a younger man and I played a lot of basketball, I loved to play defense. I was a better defender than I was a scorer. And so I liked to play defense. But defense is hard work. And I can remember we'd play, hours and hours. I'd go down to the gym on Friday afternoons and play for 6 hours or something like that. And as the afternoon wears on, your body is just getting worn down. And I can remember, getting toward the end of a game, and I'm defending the guy, and he's coming down, and my legs feel heavy. They just feel like they're thick, and my lungs are burning because I've been running, and I would pray, God, one more time. Help me defend him one more time. Just one more time. And then the play would happen, and we'd go down, and then he'd be coming down again. I'd say, God, one more time. One more time. And I would pray that again and again and again and again. Help me to defend this guy one more time. Now, nobody cares. Nobody remembers whether he scored or not. No one even remembers. None of that matters, but it trained me for battle. And I talked to God. I didn't just do it on my own. Help me, God, be strong in this thing right now. And that trains you. That's why soldiers go through boot camp, to train them for the real battle. Let God take you through boot camp in life. And it is boot camp because he's training your hands for battle. You want to read a good book about this, read Redemption at Hacksaw Ridge, or watch the movie Hacksaw Ridge. Because that guy did that on a much bigger stage. That's strength, courage. You and I need courage. And I pray a lot, God, keep me safe. God, just keep me safe. That's from Psalm 16. It says, what does it say? Psalm 16:1. I pray it all the time. Keep me safe, O God, for in you I take refuge. Truth is, I get afraid. I'm a 60-year-old man. I shouldn't be afraid. I tell myself that, but that's not my reality. I get afraid of all kinds of things. And so when I become afraid, I train myself to say, God, you're bigger than I am. Keep me safe, O God, for in you I take refuge. You can do things I can't do. Keep me safe. Give me courage. Examples of that are Paul and perhaps Esther. If you want to go and read biblical stories of people who were brave, courageous, and strong, Paul and Esther, I think, are good ones. I'm going to end with this verse. It's one we started with, Psalm 73:23. This can be true for you, yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand. A little while later, but as for me, it is good to be near God. That's your reality. God is your close, personal, constant companion, and it can be your experience if you're willing to practice it. God gives us pictures of what that looks like. It's a long-term process. You'll do it well and not well. You'll grow in it. Some things you're good at, some things you're not. Make it your ambition to walk with God, because you can. It's like Noah. It's like Abraham. God wants to walk with you holding your hand, and I pray that you would do it. Father, thank you that you long for that and you give it. It's possible for us. I pray that we would long for it as well, and that longing would stir us to practice it, would stir us to step into it and to keep going. Help us, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. 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 Amen.